Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're taking a look at GoCollect's hottest Silver Age comics for the month of October. Now, this is a video I meant to do last week, but I was not feeling very well. I was a little bit out of commission, so we're playing catch up here on the Swaggle YouTube channel. And I still think it's worth talking about these books because, hey, they're Silver Age books. When is it not a good time to talk about Silver Age books? So in this video, we're going to take a look at them. Of course, the hottest Silver Age books are the 5 books that have jumped the most in terms of volume of sales in the market in this last month, and I think we have a really interesting list to talk about. But before I get into the video, if you guys could drop me a like or comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, helps support the channel, doing those things I would appreciate. But let us get into this video here today. Now, of course, I'll put a link in the description if you guys want to do your own reading, but of course, this article is written by Ryan Kirksey. He is the one that always does the Silver Age books, and this comes out on a monthly basis. So these are the hottest Silver Age books for the month of October, and coming in at the number 5 spot is a book that I think is not surprising to be on this list. Of course, I'm sure you guys have been seeing this book everywhere. We've been, covering it here on the channel. We've been talking about, the news associated with it. But this one, of course, is Silver Surfer number 3, up 31 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, you guys know this is the book that came out in 1968, written by Stan Lee and drawn by John Buscema, and would feature the first appearance of the character known as Mephisto. Now, Mephisto, one of my all-time favorite villains. This is the book that I personally have a lot of nostalgia for because it's the first time I recognized a book being a key book. It's one of the first wall books I remember seeing. And it's cool to see this book popping up on the list because, if it's popping up on the list, that must mean that there is some kind of pop cultural, maybe MCU tie-in to the idea of Mephisto now possibly making their way into a Disney Plus show or a Marvel movie or whatever the case may be. And of course, we recently got the news that Sacha Baron Cohen, otherwise known as Borat or Ali G, is apparently rumored right now to be playing the character of Mephisto and is likely going to make his debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the Ironheart show. But I'm somebody who does actually believe some of these rumors. There have been some interesting things that I've personally heard about the character of Mephisto, and I do actually think that this is a character that makes a lot of sense to sort of bring in to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I do think that at a certain point there was even rumors that they were thinking of using Mephisto in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline when they had Josh Brolin playing Thanos. To me, I've already stated that I think Mephisto could take over the Mr. Sinister role in Secret Wars, playing that major domo figure to Doctor Doom. So it makes sense to have a character like this. And what we know of the Ironheart show, knowing that they're going to have the Hood in it, he's going to have kind of that technology versus mysticism. It makes sense that the Hood, who they're working for, could be a character like Mephisto. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.6 actually had a couple recent sales, so I want to focus on those. But there are 8 9.8s on the census. There was a sale in this current calendar year of $55,000, which is a really strong sale overall for the 9.8 grade. But 9.6 I think is interesting to look at because we do have a sale coming off of the announcement for this particular news cycle, where we did see a sale here in mid-October at the $12,500 level. Now, that is not a number that is the all-time record price. The record price, as you can see here, was one that was set during WandaVision, where someone paid $16,000 for the 9.6 grade. But it is definitely a testament to kind of, the news cycle here, where you saw, this book definitely decreasing over the course of 2021 at the $11,400, $11,200. You had a sale earlier this year at $8,400. Someone got a steal right there. And then this one jumped back up to $12,500. Let's take a look at some of the 8.0s here. 8.0 has 218 on the census. Fair market value is $950. 30-day moving at $960. This is probably a more accurate depiction of what this book's trajectory looked like, where you kind of had the rumors blowing this thing up, and ever since then has been on a really, really big decline. But now, it's not that the prices are necessarily going back up for this particular book coming off the rumor, but we've seen increased volume of sales. And I would actually say that whoever, picked up this book right here at $960, the 8.0 range here on Heritage, I think got a pretty good deal for themselves overall. That kind of fits right in line to the trend. Then if we go down here to the 4.0 range, you can see the 30-day moving for that is $270. Fair market value was $400. A lot of these books have corrected really, really hard, and this book is sort of finding its floor. But I do think that that right now is actually a decent time to pick up this book if you can get it at those, kind of corrected fair market values. It doesn't seem like a bad entry point to me if you're able to find a 4.0 at that $270 price point. And I would say that that's pretty accurate as far as, being able to find this book, where even at the low grade, if you go down to that 2.0 range, you're still going to have to spend around $200 to $250 or so. All right, let's go on now to the fourth hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the fourth hottest Silver Age comic of the month is a very cool one to talk about, one that I think is really interesting as far as its key comic book distinction, or maybe not key comic book distinction. But this one right here is X-Men number 50, up 32 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1968, written by Arnold Drake, and would feature the classic, iconic cover art by Jim Steranko. This would be the first cover appearance of the character known as Polaris, the second appearance of her in story, and actually, as Ryan points out in the article, the very first time that the X-Men logo would take that iconic kind of bubble letter angular format. Now, kind of like I was mentioning in the setup, I do think that this is a very interesting book to talk about because it is the second appearance of Polaris, her first cover appearance here. Of course, X-Men number 49 is the first appearance of Polaris in story, although technically I don't think she has taken up the name of Polaris yet in that particular issue. But this is a very interesting example of, how first appearances aren't necessarily the thing that the comic book market always wants. A great cover can sometimes trump the actual first appearance of a character if the books are close enough in terms of their, release date, so to speak. And this is kind of what I think about with, the X-Men annual book versus X-Men 266. It does seem like even if, the market agrees that the annual book is Gambit's first appearance, people would still prefer the cover of 266. And this seems to be one of those situations where people, even if they agree that 49 is technically the first appearance of this character, I think a lot of people would rather have this cover for a multitude of reasons. I mean, it is so striking, this classic Steranko with the all green format. I mean, people like to see the character, that they want on their cover of their book. It has the very unique, first time use of the X-Men trade dress, and it is the number 50 issue versus, say, number 49. So I think it's really interesting that this is a book that people, target. They kind of target 49 and 50 together, but I do feel like if you were to give someone an option of what they would actually rather have in their collection, a lot of people would choose number 50 over number 49. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, to me, first appearance has always just sort of been a title and sort of a guiding North Star as to why you would maybe want to own a book. But at the end of the day, whatever is the reason why people want to own the book is the reason why people want to own the book. Sometimes people just want the cover and they actually don't care that it is the second appearance of the character. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s, there's actually 27 on the census. A year ago sale was 13,000. But let's kind of go down here to the 9.4s where we have some recent sales to talk about. 9.4, 114 on the census. Fair market value is 2,050. 30-day moving 2160. And this is definitely an interesting book that, has actually held up really well overall in terms of this comic book market. And I think this is something like that's worth talking about, where you can see up here, and I appreciate how Go Collect has this, you can always see the top percentile of book of grade that they will list for you here. And what people always say in terms of investment level grade is that when you own a book, if you want to protect your investment as much as you can, you want to be in the top 10% of grades. And the reason for that is because if you're in the top 10%, there's not many people that can undercut you. Sure, they can sell their low grade version of the book, but there's going to be a lot of whale collectors that want the best of the best. And, there's not going to always be, an opportunity to buy a 9.4 of this particular grade. And you can see that even with the increase of the 2021 comic book boom, a book at this particular level has been able to kind of hold its value, generally speaking, even in this current kind of economic downturn. You can see right here on 10/18 on Heritage, this book went for $21.60, which is kind of right in line to what it sold for a couple months ago at $20.40, and maybe a little bit down for what it went for on eBay at $24.78, but is still kind of matching some of the prices. And generally speaking, for a book at this high of a grade, you can see that there's only been 4 sales in this calendar year. There was 5 sales in the last calendar year. So it's going to be hard for this particular book to ever crash, so to speak. But if we go down down to, some of the other values here. Let's take a look at the 7.0 range here. 189 in the census, fair market value 425, 30-day moving 450. You can see a different story where this is a book that has, kind of corrected off of its 2021 price. My guess would be that there is still some room for this book to correct even further, but that remains to be seen if that'll be the case. I tend to think that most books will eventually correct due to the current kind of economic situation we're in, kind of go back to my Silver Age index formula for most of them. But I do think that, where people are seeing these prices, people are thinking that this is a good time to buy regardless. And then of course, at the bottom, you might see it slabbed at the low grade, but generally speaking, if you want to buy a low grade raw copy of this book, it's still going to cost you around that $200 price point. All right, let's go on now to the third hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the third hottest Silver Age comic of the month is one that is cool to talk about as well. This one right here is Amazing Spider-Man number 13, up 36 slots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1964, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko, and would feature the first appearance of the character known as Mysterio. Now, Mysterio, as you guys all know, one of the great Spider-Man villains, made his debut in the Spider-Man Far From Home movie played by Jake Gyllenhaal. And there was a lot of conversation of, was Mysterio really dead at the end of that movie? Was Mysterio maybe going to be, coming back in the No Way Home film that we recently got in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And a lot of people were thinking, hey, that would have made a lot of sense because we kind of got this sort of Sinister Six team up, or maybe it was a Sinister Five, and it felt like they were missing that sixth member, and it would have made a lot of sense that Mysterio could have slotted into that film overall, but that is not where the story went. But as Ryan points out in the article, one of the reasons why this book could be picking up a little bit of steam is that we did get the re-release of the Spider-Man No Way Home film, where they kind of added some deleted scenes, they gave us some extra footage, and there was maybe a little bit of speculation that we were going to get some kind of Easter egg or some payoff of the Mysterio character, and maybe that's one of the reasons why this book moved a little bit in the market. But this is one of those books that I think is really hot in this last month due to the fact that we're kind of now at that point, after the movie, after the hype, where people are thinking, hey, this is a good time to buy once again. This is still an all-time great Amazing Spider-Man book. Not quite top 10, but top 20. People are always going to want to have this in their collection. There's going to be so many Amazing Spider-Man collectors. At some point, you're going to have to get your hands on a first appearance of Mysterio. And Mysterio is going to be a character that we're going to have in Spider-Man stories for many, many years to come. So I still think that this is a great classic book and a character that, is still iconic to the Spider-Man mythos. But as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s, there's actually one on the census, but let's talk about some of the books that have had recent sales. 9.2s have 34.5 on the census, 12,500 fair market value. This book 90 days ago sold for 12,600, has maybe come down a little bit, but generally speaking, I would say that 12,600, 13,200, and 12,000 are all sort of roughly the same. I guess 13,000 is a little bit hotter, but generally speaking, because it is that high grade, this one has been pretty, slow and steady, rising up as, comic books tend to do. But let's go down here to the 4.0 and kind of see what the story is with this particular book. Now, there is 268 on the census. Fair market value suggested to be 1,200. 30-day moving is 1080. And then, as you can see here from this graph, this has been one that's been a little more volatile overall, where we had a big spike up due to his involvement in Spider-Man number 2, a big correction, as books always correct after the film, then kind of another big spike up because of 2021, and then renewed interest in this particular book because people were thinking, hey, maybe he's going to be involved in the, Spider-Man sort of Sinister Six plotline. And kind of now where we are, this book has had, its correction off of 2021, but, you kind of still have to figure out, is this book correcting based off of its use in the movie in 2019? Where is really the appropriate value for this thing? And I think this book is starting to kind of figure out its floor at the 4.0 range, just right in on that 4-figure price point overall. And then, of course, down here at the bottom, you might see it slab from time to time at the low grade, but generally speaking, when you go to find raw copies of this thing, it's still going to run you back around that $400 to $500 level. All right, let's go on now to the second hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the second hottest Silver Age comic of the month is one that actually kind of, connects to the previous book we just talked about. But this one, of course, is Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1, up 37 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1964, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko, and would feature the first appearance of the team known as the Sinister Six. Now, this is a book that got extremely hot at the end of last year and the top of this year when we got Spider-Man No Way Home, due to the fact, of course, that we had effectively what would have been the Sinister Six in that film. Although we didn't really get them, we kind of got a Sinister Five, and they never really said that they were the Sinister Six. But for all intents and purposes, it did really feel like we were getting the Sinister Six team. And this is one of the books that I think really blew up in the market. But kind of where we are now, I think it's really interesting because anecdotally speaking, this is a book I see for sale all of the time. I mean, every time I feel like I'm, perusing Grails comics on Instagram, shout out to the Grails Network team, but every time I'm perusing their page, I feel like there's always books like this for sale. Every time I'm on, eBay or whatever, I feel like there's always listings for this book. It feels like a lot of people are selling this one. And I don't know if that's due to the fact that, now that we're on the other end of the film, everybody wants to kind of unload their copies. Maybe people overextended with this one because I feel like this was kind of an undervalued key for a while. And then it got really hot with the movie. And I think, the prices doubled overnight or tripled even in some situations. And then now kind of where people are with everything correcting in the economy, people are sort of looking to kind of unload. Maybe they over leveraged themselves. Maybe they went too high on this book. And so now they're trying to kind of figure out a way to kind of salvage some of the costs. But I do think that this is still an all-time great book, and I feel like it's very likely at some point in the future we will see a film with a true Sinister Six team. And as we dig into the numbers for this one, let's take a look at some of the values here. 9.8s, there's actually 5 on the census, but let's talk about the 9.0s because we had recent sales for those. 49 in the census, fair market value 15,500, 90-day moving is 8,400. But let's kind of go down here to the 4.0. Always easier to kind of paint a clearer picture because we have a higher volume of sales for this book, but you can just take a look at that graph and understand the journey that this book has had. This is a book that had a jetpack to its back and shot up extremely high during 2021 and kind of rode a wave through, say, October of 2021 and December, where we had, the Spider-Man film. Definitely was selling at that, high of $2,500. I think here's a sale for $3,000. And then ever since then has really been kind of correcting and leveling off to where I think this last sale at $1,740 on Heritage might be kind of in line to the trend of 2020, where this book was kind of selling around the $1,200 price point. Could still be a little high overall. I think that there's still, some room for this book to correct. And then of course at the bottom, low grade 2.0 versions of this book, they're still going to set you back around that $600 to $700 price point. Although, I think kind of where we are in this current market, you have been seeing some slide under the fair market value around that $500 level. All right, with that out of the way, that brings us now to the hottest Silver Age comic of the month. And the hottest Silver Age comic of the month is a very interesting one that is kind of surprising almost. But this one is X-Men #9, up 66 spots. And what is the significance of this? Well, of course, this is the book that came out in 1965, written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby, and would feature the first meeting and first battle of the X-Men versus Avengers. Now, hard for me to really pinpoint why this particular book had an increase in sales in this past month, but I do think that this is still a very cool, very kind of underrated Silver Age key. I mean, we're talking about the first meeting and battle of the Avengers and X-Men, and even though we might still be, a little ways away from getting X-Men into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it does feel like these teams are going to collide at some point in the future. It does feel like, maybe in a phase 7 or a phase 8, we're going to have some event film that is X-Men versus Avengers. And I do think that these kind of, first meetup books or these first battle books are really interesting to the comic book market. And for that reason, it does feel like this is kind of an underappreciated and sleeper book. And I would say of all the books we've even talked about on this list, this is probably, the most affordable of all of the options, which could be another reason why it is the #1 book out there, because it is in a price point that comic book collectors can actually afford. And speaking of those price points, let's actually dig into the numbers here and just kind of jump right to it. 9.8s have 3 on the census. Hasn't been a sale for that in quite a while. Let's jump down here to the 9.0s. 75 on the census. Fair market value is $3,200. $3,400. 30-day or 90-day moving, is $3,360. And this is definitely a book that, you know, kind of low key has been slowly kind of going up in value overall. On 9/13, we had a $2,400 sale. And then the day before that on Heritage, on 9/12, we had a $4,320 sale. But the difference of these two books is that this one was white pages versus this one, which was off-white to white pages. And I think that that's really interesting. I mean, would you guys actually pay $2,000 more to get a book with white pages versus a book with off-white to white pages? But I do think that this is one of those books that kind of low-key goes up slowly over time because it's, you know, a little bit out of the kind of main spotlight for a lot of other keys out there in the market. And then of course at the low grade, you know, if you want to get your hands on a raw copy of that book, typically they sell around that $150 to $200 price point. Anyways, that's all for this video. Those were Go Collect's hottest Silver Age comics for the month of October. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have any of these books? Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. I'll see you in the next video.